Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am taking 15 of my top Dollar Tree Farmhouse DIYs and putting them all together in this one video. If you enjoyed today's video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comment section down below which one is your favorite. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure to click that subscribe button and the notification bell so you will be notified the next time I upload a brand new video. Each of today's projects will be timestamped in my description box below if you would like to skip ahead to any particular project. Now, with that being said, let's get started on these 15 DIYs, and they are not in any particular order. I am using these beautiful glass canisters from Dollar Tree, and I am going to go ahead and remove the lid as well as the plastic piece that's inside the lid. So I just used a flathead screwdriver and lifted up a piece of that plastic lid to the point where I could get my pliers under there, and then I just rolled my pliers over until the plastic piece came off. I did that for all three lids. Now keep your plastic pieces because we will be attaching these back on later. I painted each of the canisters with 2 coats of my Waverly White chalk paint, and I also painted each of the lids. And I did make sure that I allowed that paint to dry between each coat so that it would have a nice smooth finish. Now, I wanted my lids to have a wood look, so I am painting them with the white chalk paint to start off with a very nice base coat. These are absolutely gorgeous after 2 coats of paint. So to get that realistic wood look, I'm going to be using my antique wax made by Waverly. And I have used this technique on a metal cabinet, which I will link in the cards above, as well as that video in my description box if you are interested in watching that to see how I get this wood look. So I'm just going to apply the wax with a brush, and then I'm taking a lint-free cloth and wiping most of that wax off. And I'm going in the same direction to give it more of a wood grain effect. And I did apply 2 coats, allowing it to dry in between each of those coats. And I think this is just so gorgeous and so realistic, and it looks like real wood. I'm going to reapply those plastic pieces back onto the lid, and I'm going to set those to the side. So since this is chalk paint and I want to make sure that I protect the rim because those lids are going to be in and out of there, I want to protect that chalk paint using some clear sealing wax made by Krylon. And I'm just going to apply that with my lint-free cloth. And then once I apply a nice generous amount in that area, I will use a clean portion of the cloth to wipe most of that wax off to leave it with a nice smooth finish. Now, I don't recommend putting any food in these containers because I did paint the top part of the rim, but you could certainly store any kind of cute items like cotton balls or Q-tips. I'm going to be displaying them on this tray. Now, I made this tray in a previous DIY, and I will have a link to that video in my description box if you are interested. And I am also using some scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby. I'm going to go ahead and just measure out the height and width of this tray that I have already made. And I'm using my Cricut cutter because I don't cut the most perfectly straight lines. And I wanted to make sure that I got it as straight as possible so that I would not have any gaps when I place the paper in the bottom of the tray. I always like to make sure that the paper is going to fit before I apply it. And I will be applying it using some Mod Podge. And I am using matte Mod Podge so that it doesn't have a very glossy finish, because once I apply an even layer on the bottom, and then I place my paper in there and make sure that there are no wrinkles or air bubbles and that everything's nice and smooth, I will go back over the top of that with my Mod Podge to protect the paper in case anything were to get on it. And then I want to make sure that it has a matte finish to match the chalk paint. After I allow that to dry, I can style my canisters right here on this tray, and I think they are super beautiful. I love how they turned out. Two of these wood round plaques from Walmart, and I think they were about $1 a piece. And I'm also going to be using some beads. I get my beads in this very large bag from Amazon, which I will have linked in my Amazon store in my description box below if you are interested. I'm going to take my hot glue and do one small section at a time. Now these wood plaques have a lip on them, so I'm going right there to the outside edge of that lip, and then I'm going to place each of my beads with the holes facing up so you don't see any of those, and I'm going to go all the way around in small sections so that my hot glue doesn't dry before I can add my beads on. Then I'm going to take that other wood round and put the glue right there at the lip all the way around this, and then I can set this right on top of those beads. And you guys, this thing is so beautiful. I am loving how it's looking already. I'm going to take one of Dollar Tree's candlesticks, glass candlesticks, and I'm going to give it a base coat of my Waverly White chalk paint, and I'm only going to put one coat on there and let it dry because I'm going to go back in after that dries with my antique wax. And I'm going to give this one good coat. I'm not going to wipe it off. I'm just trying to make it look like wood. And then I'm going to set that to the side and let it dry, and I'm going to put the same antique wax right on these wood rounds. Now to get down in those beads, I just found that it was easier to pounce the brush up and down to make sure you get inside all of those crevices and cracks. And then I am going to go back in with a cloth, or you can go in with a paper towel and just smear that in and blend it in really nicely, and it's going to give it that nice antique look. So I did this to the entire piece. Now you want to make sure when you add your beads you don't put a lot of extra glue on there because the wax will not stick to the glue, and you really don't want to be able to see that extra glue. This is how it looks. I'm going to make sure they are dry before I attach the two pieces together. To attach them, I am going to use some E6000 and some hot glue. And I'm going to put 4 dots of E6000 opposite of each other because I do not like to mix my E6000 and hot glue together. For some reason, it just doesn't work well if you mix the two together. So that E6000 is going to give you that permanent long-term hold, and the hot glue is going to give you that temporary hold. I'm going to place the top part of the candlestick to the bottom part of the wood, and now we have this gorgeous riser. I think it turned out super cute. I'm going to use one of these metal buckets that I got from Dollar General for $1, and I'm just going to place some extra eucalyptus stems that I have lying around in there, and then I can place this right on top of that wood riser. And I think this turned out so gorgeous. I love this piece. It looks like a real antique wood piece. Let me know what you think of project number 2. And these cute little plastic garden fences from Dollar Tree. And I wanted to remove those top corners, so I'm just going to make a mark with my pencil to determine how I want this to look at the top. And then I'm going to take my ruler and draw a straight line across those tabs on the side so I'll know where to score those. I took a sharp utility knife and went in and scored the bottom parts of the fence, and then came in with my scissors and trimmed that down. I thought that the scissors would give me a little bit more of a closer cut, but you could certainly cut those with the utility knife. I cut the other one as well. And then I'm going to come in on the side where those 2 tabs are, and I'm actually going to score it on the top. I don't want to cut it all the way through because if I cut this off, it's going to leave a hole there. Then I'm going to come in on the back part of it and kind of cut a slit on those 2 sides of the tabs, and then I'll be able to push that piece over, and then it'll be nice and flush on the side and you won't have these 2 gaping holes. So once I get that pushed over, I can go over and do the exact same thing to the bottom one. And here you can just see that I'm going to score it on the outside so that I'll be able to bend that over and get that nice and flush. Then I can go in and cut those tabs off with my scissors. And then I can go in with some hot glue and add that to the inside, which will be the back part of the fence, to hold that in place. Then on the other side of the fence, it has these tabs that connect these fencings together. And you can just cut that off with your utility knife and it won't leave any holes. You can just cut it nice and flush. For that top part that I want to remove, this is the back part of the fence. So I'm going to draw a line a little bit higher than the actual top part of that curve of the fence, because if I cut these off at the line that I drew on the front, I realized that it was going to give me a gap at that top rim. So what I'm going to do is take my utility knife on the back side of the fence and cut that down until I'm able to remove that top portion. And you'll see in just a minute what I mean by leaving a little bit extra at the top so that you can push that over. I'm going to take my pencil and then draw the line where I need to fold it over at or bend it over. And then I'm going to take my utility knife and score over that. I don't want to go all the way through the plastic. I just want to score it enough so that I could take my pliers and bend that over so that now it'll have that top piece just like the other part of this arch. Then I'm going to go in with some hot glue and glue that in place. Because this is some pretty thick plastic, it really did not want to hold it in place just by itself. So I'm going to take that bottom piece that I cut off of the fence and glue that in there so that it will have something to attach to. And I'll just put a good amount of hot glue there in between those and hold it in place, and then add a little bit of glue at the bottom part of that so it will stay in place. And then you're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So once I got that bottom piece in, holding that top piece in, I realized that those side pieces were going to stick out a little too far. So when I hang it on the wall, it would have one side sticking out further than the other. So I just cut those down flush. And now it is ready for me to paint. I'm going to go in with some Waverly Antique Wax. So I wanted to create the outside part of it to look like wood. If I had this to do over again, I would paint this entire piece with some white chalk paint to give it a nice base, because the wax does not want to stick to plastic. I was going for that wood grain look, so I was taking my cloth and kind of wiping it to give it more of like a grain effect, but as I was doing that, it was basically just wiping the wax off. So I went ahead and continued putting that first coat on, thinking, well, I'll let it dry and see how it looks and see if the wax is going to come off. Well, after it dried, it didn't really look the way I wanted it to look. So I do go back in with a second coat, and with the second coat, I do not wipe it off. I just leave it on there. So if you put the chalk paint on as a base, then, or maybe some Mod Podge on as a base, then you would only have to put one coat on there. I did make sure that I got those inside edges as well, so it looks like one wood piece all the way around. I did get a little bit of wax on the plastic, so this is after the wax has dried, and it wiped off very easily, so that made me think that the wax was going to come off the outside. So I went in with some Mod Podge and I painted over the entire portion that I put all of that wax on. And then because I did not paint it to begin with, I am going to go over all of those white sections, because this is a matte finish Mod Podge and it's going to make it look less like plastic and more realistic. So this is how it looks after it's dry, and it is so beautiful. I am loving how this arch is turning out. I'm going to create a swag to go at the bottom, and I'm using some eucalyptus from Walmart, and I've just cut the stems off of the bundle, and I'm going to put 3 of those stems on each side going in opposite directions. I'm going to attach these stems using some Dollar Tree floral wire. And what I like to do is just take the second stem and overlap the first one right there at the bottom part of the stem, and then wrap my floral wire around there really tightly. So if you're going to recreate this, I would leave that extra floral wire on there and not cut it off like I just did, because you'll need that to attach it to your archway. I ended up having to use extra floral wire because I cut all my pieces off, and if I had left it on there, I could have just attached it. I did the exact same thing on the other side with the other three going in the opposite direction. And then I'm just going to hold that up there to make sure I have it the length I want and to determine where I need to connect the two pieces in the middle. And then I could just overlap those and attach it again with some floral wire. Then I can take this now and attach it to the archway, and I'm attaching it at the bottom of each of those diamonds. So if you left that extra floral wire on there, you can skip this step where I'm having to add this extra on there. Once I have all of that in place, I'm going to create a bow to go right in the center. You don't have to create a bow. You could leave it just as it is. You can use whatever kind of ribbon you like. I am using some buffalo check ribbon from Hobby Lobby. And to create my bow, I just create a loop about the size that I want, and then I'll create another loop at the bottom the same size, and then I'll go around to the side and do that again, creating a loop at the top and the bottom, and continue that until I have 3 loops on each side. Then I will squeeze it really tightly in the middle, and then take a piece of floral wire and go around that and twist it in the back really tightly to cover up the floral wire. And to give it a little bit more of a finished look, I'm going to take a smaller piece of that ribbon and I am going to glue it into thirds. So I'm just going to fold it over about halfway, glue it down, and then repeat that. And then I can glue this around my bow and it'll give it that nice finished look. Then you can attach your bow to the center of your swag with either hot glue or some floral wire. And I'm going to fluff that bow out nice and pretty. I'm going to attach mine with some hot glue and let it sit for a minute. And I think that this turned out so beautiful. These real wood arches or MDF arches go for $40 or more online, and you can create your own that looks so gorgeous for $1 from a Dollar Tree fence. Valentine signs, I'm going to remove that burlap heart and then take some sandpaper and go over that section. So again, if I had this to do over, I would remove all of the paper from that because I really wanted to use that side so I could have those grooves in there, those indentions. I did give it a base coat of my Waverly White chalk paint, and I did paint the entire piece. So while that's drying, I'm going to use some of these larger boxes from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use just the lids. I'm going to use 3 of those lids, as well as some jumbo craft sticks from Dollar Tree. So I'm going to take 6 of those craft sticks, line those up, and then I can set my lid on top of that, and then draw my lines for each side so I will know where to cut these. I like to go in with my utility knife and score each of those lines before I go in with my scissors and cut them, because that's just going to help prevent it from splintering or splitting and cracking, and you'll get a nice even cut. Then I'm going to take some hot glue and attach all 6 of these to the top part of this lid. Now I'm not too concerned about the design on the inside because you really won't see that. Then I'm going to take some sandpaper and go over those outside edges, and you just want to make sure that you try to keep it as flush as possible when you're adding those craft sticks to the outside edges. I'm going to do the other 2 lids exactly the same way. This is how the sign looks after I have painted it one time. I'm going to go over it with my antique wax, and I'm going to make sure that I get down in those indentions in the front. So this is what I mean when I said I wish I had removed the paper, because I'm taking my cloth and I'm going in one long stroke to create that wood grain look. And as I am doing this, the L and the V and the E are bleeding back through. So I do go in with a second coat, but you can still see it, but it's okay. I mean, once we get this all put together, you really won't see it, but I just wish I had taken the paper off. I used the antique wax on all of those lids, and I did go in on the inside just because you'll see that inside rim some, but you won't see that design. Then I took my tape measure and I marked 2¼ inches, and then 9½ inches, and then 16¼ inches on both sides so that I would know where to place each of these trays. So I just used my ruler and lined it up where I'd already placed my markings. And then I'm going to use my E6000 and hot glue and place these trays on top of the sign in those 3 sections that I had already marked. Once I have those in place, to reinforce this, I am going to go in with my staple gun and put 2 staples in each of these to staple those trays to the sign. Once I have those in place, I am going to create a hanger for the back, and I'm going to be using some of Dollar Tree's nautical rope and some hot glue, and then I'm going to go in with just some extra ribbon that I have and put some hot glue and put that in place just to give it a little bit more security. Now, these are some of those really cute buckets from Dollar General. They have white, black, navy blue, and the silver. These are so adorable for just $1 a piece, and I love the fonts they have on them as well. Now, you could use this shelf or this hanging sign we have in your craft room and put craft supplies in it. I am going to use mine and decorate it with some florals, and I'm going to use some of the green lavender and then some of the lavender with the blooms on it, and I believe these came from Walmart. I'm going to place those in the white buckets, and then I'm going to use this white hop clover, and I'm putting that in the black bucket, and these turned out so beautiful. I absolutely love how this turned out. I think I'll create another one so I can have 2 of them and then put them on opposite sides of like a centerpiece on the wall. This wood plaque sign from Dollar Tree, you can find this in the Crafter Square section. And I'm going to go ahead and remove that hanger, and then I'm going to take some 150 grit sandpaper, and you can find this as well in a package at Dollar Tree in their hardware section. And I'm going to sand this entire piece because it has a lot of rough edges. Once I get that sanded, I'm going to go ahead and wipe that off, and then I'm going to take my Waverly White chalk paint, and I'm going to give this 2 thin coats, allowing it to dry in between coats. And I do go ahead and paint this entire piece as well as those outside edges. Once this has completely dried, I'm going to take my black oil-based Sharpie. You can find these at Hobby Lobby. And I'm going to go around the outside edge of this sign. And once I get finished going around the edge, I'm going to emphasize around the curves on the 4 parts of it, the outside parts. And I'm going to thicken those lines up. Right there at those curves, I'm just going to thicken that up to give it some more definition and to give it some more character. Once I have that finished, I do make sure that that has dried before I move on to the next step. I'm going to be using some of these letter stickers from Dollar General, and you can get these, I think they're about $2 a pack, and I just love the way those letters are shaped. I am also going to be using some letters from Walmart. You can get this in a package, I think they're $3 or $4 for 6 pages. And then I'm also going to be using these little half pearl stickers from Dollar Tree, and they have these little elastic pieces, so I just cut those off. And then I'm going to paint each one of those pearl stickers with 2 coats of my black chalkboard craft paint. And then I'm just going to set those to the side and let those dry. I took some painter's tape, and I'm going to use this as a guide so that I can line my letters up. Now, a sweet viewer of mine suggested that you put these on the tape, and then you could place your stickers on there, but I didn't feel too comfortable doing that. I didn't think I'd be able to get the tape up with the stickers on it. So I just cut my stickers out and lined those up where I wanted them to be to make sure everything was centered. And then I peeled each one of those off and just used my painter's tape as a guide to line up the bottom part of each sticker. And then I always like to start in the middle so that I can make sure I have enough room to go around each of those letters. Once I have all those in place, I will take that painter's tape up and push those bottom pieces down. And then I'm going to reuse that same painter's tape and put it at the bottom of the sign so I can add those Walmart stickers. So I'm just going to line that up again using this as a guide. And then I am going to start in the middle and go ahead and apply my stickers right there on the top of the tape. And I am going to spell out open 24/7. Now these stickers don't have any characters on them. They just have the letters and some numbers. So I just used one of the L's to use as the slant between 24 and 7. Then I can push all of those down and remove my tape and then push the bottom pieces down. Once I have all the stickers on there and everything is lined up, I'm going to go over this with some matte Mod Podge just to seal those stickers in and also take that shine off. It's going to give it a nice matte finish. And then you're going to want to make sure that that dries before you take your hot glue and add those little pearl stickers on each side of this sign. And I think that just gave it a little elegant touch. To create the hanger, I am using some black ribbon from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to take the painter's tape and wrap it around the ends and twist that really tightly so that I can feed those through the holes at the top of the sign. Once I have both of those sides fed through, I'm going to tie a knot on each one of those, and then I can cut that extra painter's tape off. And then to secure it even more, I'll take my hot glue and go around under that knot so that it'll hold it in place. So I'll cut that extra painter's tape off, and then I just pull the knot up and put a little bit of glue under there, and then I'll pull the hanger from the front part of the sign so that the knot will seal that glue in. And then this little project is complete. I think it is so beautiful. It's going to look so good hanging on my pantry door. Let me know what you think of using the sign from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to go ahead once again and remove the hanger. And then I used my hair dryer to heat that up to loosen some of the glue that's holding that paper on the front. And I just hold it in one place until I can loosen that glue up a little bit and then peel that paper back. Now I was able to get the majority of this paper off. What little bits that I couldn't get off, I just took my sandpaper and sanded that down nice and smooth. So this is now going to become the back part of the sign, and our back part will become the front part of the sign. I'm going to give this 2 coats of my Waverly White chalk paint, again allowing it to dry in between coats, and I do make sure that I get those outside edges. Now I didn't paint the back because I am going to be hanging mine up, but I made sure that I got the sides. Then I took my ruler and again my oil-based Sharpie and just lined that up where the grooves are and drew a line to create some wood planks. And I did that for all 3 of those grooves. Then I took the same Waverly White chalk paint after that oil-based Sharpie dried and a chippy brush, and I dry brushed over each one of these lines to give it a nice realistic look instead of just some lines that were drawn on there. Then I took my Cricut and went to Cricut Design Space and created a decal. Now I know not everyone has a Cricut, so I do have this as a free printable on my website, which is in my description box below. So if you'd like to go over there and print that off, you could certainly trace this onto your project. And I also have the fonts that I used in my description box below, and the chicken there, it was just a free image on Google that I just downloaded. So I went ahead and applied my decal, and I guess this is called burnishing. I'm not too familiar. I'm really new with the Cricut. And I went ahead and pulled my transfer tape off, and then you could just leave this to be set up, but I'm going to go ahead and create a hanger for mine, and I'm going to use that same black ribbon that I used in the first project and the same method to feed that through those holes. and then tie the knots on the back and then glue those down. And I love how this sign turned out. It is so beautiful. I just love it. And again, you could set this up and not put a hanger in there. You could fill those holes in, or you could hang it up, whichever you prefer. Again, let me know what you think. Using 3 of these signs from Dollar Tree. Now, I thought they were real wood, but they're not. They're MDF. And I'm going to take one of those and I'm going to go ahead and mark my measurements. I'm going to cut these down 2 pieces to 7 inches. So I'm going to use that one sign and cut 2 7-inch pieces. The other 2 pieces are going to become the outside part of my ladder. So I'm going to cut 2 inches off of those, so both of those pieces will be 16 inches long. Now you can use a handsaw or whatever you have on hand. I'm going to go ahead and take mine outside and use my miter saw to cut these down. Now I have 2 16-inch pieces and 2 7-inch pieces. And now I am going to make my measurements for the angles. Now you can skip this part and just leave them straight, but I wanted mine to be able to lean up against the wall. So at the top left-hand corner, I'm going to measure over 1/4 inch, and then I am going to measure down 1 inch. And this is going to give me an angle so that the top part of this towel ladder will rest up against the wall. So once I have my 1 inch measurement marked off, I can take my ruler and draw a line between the 2 measurements, so I will have a guide to know where to cut these off at. And then on the same side of this same sign, I'm going to go down to the bottom and create the angle for the bottom of this ladder. So I'm just going to measure up on the left-hand side 1/4 inch and make my mark. And then I can connect that 1/4 inch mark to the corner on the right-hand side and draw my line to make my guide. And you're going to want to do this exact same process for the second sign, so that they will both be the same and match. So I'm just going to take these outside and cut these down. And once I have those cut down, I just like to line mine up on top of each other to make sure that all of my angles are the same and that everything looks exactly the same with those 2 pieces. Now I am going to drill some pilot holes, and these are going to become the outside pieces of the ladder, and the way I set mine up was so that the wording would be on the inside. So now I have flipped it over, and these are going to be the outside parts of the ladder, and I'm going to go ahead and measure where I want to drill my holes. So the first hole is going to be 3 and, well, I started off 3 1/2. I changed it to 3 3/4. So no, it's 3 1/2. I'm sorry, you guys. It's 3 1/2 inches from the top. And then you're going to want to center that up so it's about 1 inch over. And the second measurement is 9 1/2 inches down from the top. And then again, 1 inch over to center that up. And I'm going to make that same measurement on the outside of the other piece as well. And I'm just measuring from the top down. So this is where our 2 pieces will hold the middle pieces of our ladder. So I wanted to find the center point on each end of the middle piece of the ladder. So these are 2 inches wide, so it's going to be 1 inch over, and then they're 1 inch thick, so it's going to be 1/2 inch. And you'll just make those center marks on each end of those 2 pieces. Then I took my drill with a drill bit to go ahead and just drill in these pilot holes. Now, the purpose of drilling these in is so that I can line them up with the outside pieces, but also to prevent these from splitting and cracking. Now, I did not use the right size drill bit. For the screws that I'm using, I used a smaller one. So you definitely want to make sure that you have a large enough drill bit for the screws that you're using, because if you don't, they will split, and I'll show you in just a minute what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and get those outside pieces drilled as well. And do that for both of those. And then once I have all of my pilot holes drilled, I can assemble this piece. And I'm going to be using 2-inch wood screws to put these together. So now I have these two outside pieces. I'm just going to flip them over so you're actually looking at what's going to be the front of the ladder. And then I can put my steps or pieces there in the middle. And then I'm going to take my 2-inch wood screw and go ahead and drill in that outside hole for the outside of the ladder until that point comes through, so I'll know where to line up that middle piece. And then once I line those up, I can go ahead and drill that in. And so this is where I'll show you that I didn't have a large enough drill bit, because the first piece I put in does crack and split. But it's okay, I'm still able to use it because it's still pretty secure. But just to prevent that, you want to make sure that you have a large enough drill bit so that you don't have this problem. And so see, it cracked and it split right there on the two outside edges on that side. But again, it's pretty sturdy, so I went with it and just went ahead and used it. But I did go ahead and change my drill bit out and went over all those previous holes to make them larger. Once I had those larger, I went in and added the second piece to the middle of the ladder. And this worked perfect, so this piece did not crack or split. So learn from my mistake, and then you won't have this big old crack there at the top. Then I can go ahead and add my other outside piece, doing the same thing, drilling those 2-inch screws in there. And so after I get these drilled in, if you used a large enough drill bit, you can skip the next step because hopefully you won't have any cracks or splits. But because I do have those and I wanted it to be nice and smooth and finished looking, I'm going to take some spackling and go in and fill those cracks in. And then once that spackling dries, I will go in and sand that down nice and smooth. And then it looks like it was never there. But it is pretty sturdy. I mean, you know, it's just going to hold some towels. So once I have that all sanded down, I'm going to take some apple barrel burnt umber acrylic paint, and I'm going to paint this entire piece one coat and let that dry. And then you could leave it as is, but I wanted mine to have a nice weathered wood look. So I'm going to take some water and some Waverly White chalk paint, and I'm going to mix it about a 1:1 ratio, and I'm going to mix it really good. And then I'm going to take a paintbrush and go over this piece. Now these outside pieces had some like rough texture to them. I guess it's the type of MDF they used. So I do go in after I put my paint on there, and I'll take a lint-free cloth and wipe that down. So I did this for the entire piece, and I absolutely love how the outside edges came out because it didn't have that texture like it does here on the front. See, it just turned out very beautiful and weathered wood looking with that whitewash on it. But those front pieces had like some bubble looks to it that I wasn't too thrilled about. So I do go in with my chip brush and some more of that acrylic burnt umber paint, and I'm going to dry brush over the front and back of this piece to give it a little bit more of a wood look rather than those bubbly type look that paint formed on the MDF. So I'm just going to dry brush over that. And then before that paint dries, I'm going to take my cloth, my lint-free cloth, and just lightly go over it in one direction and kind of like smearing it in to give it some lines that look like wood. And then once you get all of this done and it is completely dry, this project is finished. And I love how it turned out. I think it's very beautiful. And it's going to look so good sitting on my kitchen counter with a tea towel on it. It's just a nice decorative piece. Let me know what you think of. Start off with 2 of these Easter signs. Again, I'm going to go ahead and remove the hangers and the embellishments from the front. Once I have those removed, I'm actually going to flip it over. The front part of these signs are going to become the back, and the back are going to become the front. Once I have these in place, I am then going to go in with my favorite gray chalk paint, which is Decor Chalky Finish. You can find this at Hobby Lobby. Sometimes you can find it at Amazon. I'll try to have it linked in my Amazon store. Sometimes they don't always have this gray. They may have a lighter gray. Once I give that one coat of paint and the paint has dried, I'm going to come in with just some quart-sized paint stir sticks. You can find these at Lowe's for $30 in a pack. I'm going to start off by drawing a straight line on the end so that I can cut those rounded edges off. I like to use a utility knife and score mine and then come back in with some scissors and cut that, and it just keeps it from splitting and cracking. Once I have one piece cut the two ends off, the rounded piece, I'm going to set my second piece on top of that to determine where I need to cut the top piece off so that we can create edging for our doors. Once I have that marked, I will score it and cut it just like I did the first pieces. Then I'm going to go in and do the exact same thing for the other side. So you'll be using 2 craft sticks on each side. Then I'll come in and do the bottom as well, and I'll just take one of the craft sticks, and I actually cut it down a little bit shorter than one full craft stick, and then I can go in and piece that together at the bottom and do the exact same thing at the top. And I always try to make sure everything fits before I move on to my next piece to cut. Once I have the top piece cut in and I kind of have everything laid out, then I can go in and start working on my cross pieces in the middle. I'm just going to take 2 of the craft sticks, the full-size craft sticks, and hold them up in place. I'm going to make X's for my barn doors. So once I have those lined up, I can just take my pencil and mark the corner there at the bottom so I'll know where to cut that. And then I'll do the same thing at the top. Now I did go ahead once I got these done and cut the edging off of both of those ends, just that rounded piece. But I am not going to glue anything down because I am going to go in and paint it. And I know these aren't going to line up perfectly, and that's okay because these pieces right here will be cut again later on so that I can blend my X in together. But I just wanted to be able to lay everything out first. Then I'll go in with 2 more craft sticks to create the other part of the X, and I'll do exactly the same thing, making my markings with my pencil, and then go in with my utility knife to score them and my scissors to cut them out. And I'm not going to cut the ends off of these yet. Once I have everything cut, I do go in with my pencil and label each piece because I'm going to be painting the front, so I want to make sure that I know exactly where they go. Then I'm going to take my Waverly White chalk paint, and I'm going to give these craft sticks 1 good coat of paint on the entire piece, including those outside edges. And I will let that paint dry. So once that paint is dry, it is time for me to assemble this, and I'm just going to glue these down with some hot glue, and I'm going to start on one corner at the bottom and go ahead and add my side pieces on. And then I can add my bottom pieces in and just fill everything in with my hot glue. Then for those cross pieces for the X, I'm actually just going to hold it up there first. I want to make sure everything lines up before I make any more cuts or glue anything down. Once I have that long piece for the 2 ends that I didn't cut, I can go in and mark that with my pencil so that I can cut those where they'll meet perfectly right in the middle. And don't worry if you have a few little gaps because we are going to go in and fill those in. Once I have that set in, I can then glue it in place so I can go in and make my markings for the other part of the X. And of course, as you're doing this, we did create 2 doors, so you're going to do the exact same thing with craft sticks on the other door. Once I have those marked in place, I can then go in and glue those down after I cut the end pieces off. Once I have everything glued and lined up, and I've gone ahead and done my second door as well, I do like to have a little bit more of a finished look, so I'm going to go in with some spackling. You can use wood putty, caulk, whatever you want to use, but I'm going to go in and fill in all those cracks. And I'm trying to be careful not to get it on my gray paint. And I'm going to do that for both doors. Once I have all of that on there and my spackling has dried, I do go in with some sandpaper and sand all of that down before I go in and paint it, those pieces that I've already put that spackling on. I'm also going to paint the outside edges of each of my signs and also go over and touch up the paint where I filled everything in with the spackling. And that's going to give it that nice crisp look, and everything's going to look finished and polished. Once all of the paint has dried, I want to cover up the back of each of these pieces so that, again, it will have that finished look. And I'm going to cover this up using some craft paper. And I just cut my craft paper down just slightly bigger than my sign. And then I'm going to use some hot glue to attach this on there, spread it all out, make sure it's nice and smooth. And then I can go in with my scissors and cut all that extra craft paper off. Again, you'll do that for both of the doors. Then I'm going to set those to the side. I'm going to be using 2 beads. Now, I pick up my beads in a very large bag from Amazon, which I have linked in my Amazon store if you're interested. And I'm showing you 4 tumbling tower pieces, but you're actually going to need 6. And then these are the brain teaser games. I'm going to be using 4 of those, but you want to make sure you get 4 with the holes on the opposite sides of each other, because some of them have holes in all different places. So make sure you get 4 with the holes on opposite sides. Then I'll go in and paint each one of these all the way around with my black chalkboard craft paint. Then I'm going to take the brain teaser piece, make sure you have the holes on each side, one of the tumbling tower pieces. I'm going to put some Gorilla wood glue right in the center at the top part of that brain teaser piece, put some hot glue. Then I'm going to set my tumbling tower piece right on top of it so it's flush with the top part, and your holes are on each side at the top part. And I'm actually going to create 4 of those. These are going to become the top pieces of our door. Now I'm going to take one of Dollar Tree's flagpoles. These things are super easy to break apart. I thought I was going to need some pliers, but it literally, those little extra pieces pop right off. So I popped the bottom piece off, and then that top piece that has the hook, I'll just pop that off. And I do save all my little pieces because I might want to use those in a different DIY. Now I am left with just one long rod. Then I am going to assemble my doors by taking the pieces that we made with the brain teaser and the tumbling tower piece. I'm going to place one on each corner, making sure it's flush at the top and the sides, and I'm just going to hot glue those down. So I made sure I put some hot glue at the top, and you're just going to rest that piece right on the very top of it, but make sure it's flush to the outside edge of the door. And I'll do the exact same thing on the other side, and I'm going to do that for the other door as well. So each door will have 2 of these at the top. And this is what we're going to be hanging, or what we're used to hang our doors with. And then because I'm just a little bit extra to add the handles on, I do like to measure it. I wanted to make sure they were both in the same place. So I made a marking so I would know where to hot glue my handles on. And those are just 2 of those tumbling tower pieces. Then I can feed my rod through the beads in the back and add my doors on each side. And what I love about this piece is that you can move it. It doesn't have to stay stationary. To finish off the ends of the rod, I'm going to use those beads, and I'm just going to put some hot glue inside of the hole of the bead and then slide it onto the end until the rod comes all the way to the end of the other side of the bead but doesn't poke all the way out. And I'll add one on each end, and then this DIY is finished. I love this piece. I love how it turned out. I have mine hanging on some command strips. You can move them. You can put a wreath in the middle. And I love the fact that you could take the wreath out. You could close the doors. You can move them. I love how this turned out. I'm using one of these metal planter containers from Dollar Tree, as well as some jumbo craft sticks. I'm going to hold the first craft stick up to the top, and then I'll take my pencil and mark the outside edges of the pot. And then I'm going to take another craft stick and place that at the bottom and do the same thing, marking my outside edges at the bottom. Then I'm going to take a box cutter or a utility knife, and I'm going to score each of those pencil markings, and then I can go in with my scissors and cut those down. So I like to score these because it helps to prevent it from splitting and breaking before I cut them with the scissors. Once I have those pieces cut down, I do, again, always like to hold it up and make sure it's going to fit before I attach it to the piece. So I'm just going to attach it using some hot glue, and I'll do the exact same thing at the bottom piece. So for the top, I just made sure that I pushed it right under the rim and that I had each of the outside edges flush. Then I'll add my bottom piece, and then I'm going to take another craft stick and hold that up at the angle, and then I'm just eyeing this, just tracing out where the bottom part of the top stick and the top part of the bottom stick is, and then I can make my marks and cut them the same way. So I'm going to cut all of these craft sticks the exact same way by scoring them and then cutting them with my scissors. Once I make sure that's going to fit, I'm going to glue that one in place. Then I'm going to take another craft stick and do the exact same thing on the opposite side of this same piece. And once I have those marked, and I did find that it was easier if I kind of held it to the side so that I could line that up and draw out my marks. Once I have this glued in place, then I'm going to take 2 more craft sticks. So you're going to need a total of 6 craft sticks for each side. To create my X, I'm going to make sure that I leave the edges in the corners. So you want those edges lined up with the corners where your other sticks meet. And then again, I'm just going to eye it and mark my angles. And then I can cut those down. So I'm going to go ahead and glue one of them in, but then I did not want them to be glued on top of each other. I wanted to cut the space out. You could glue them on top of each other because they will bend a little bit, but I wanted mine to have the cutout in the middle. So I drew the first one and made sure that it was going to line up and cut it out. And then I also went ahead and cut the other half and lined it up before I glue it down. So once you get one of them cut and you make sure that they're both going to line up, then you can glue one down. You just hold them both up there so that when you glue your top piece down, you know where your angle is going to be at the bottom. And then it'll be held in place. And then you can go in and glue your bottom piece and make sure that it is lined up with the top piece. I hope that makes sense, you guys. And once I have that done, I will go in and I'm going to do all 4 sides exactly just like I did the front one. So this is how it looks after I've done all 4 sides. This is so cute and so farmhouse. I just love how it's turning out. I then took my hairdryer and put it on high. Now be careful because this is metal, but I'm going in trying to make sure that I remove any and all glue strands before I go in and paint this with my Waverly White chalk paint. So originally I was going to paint the whole entire outside piece white, but as I was painting the wood, I loved how that metal was coming through. So then I started to make sure that I took my time. So originally I wasn't really concerned about getting the paint on the metal. But then as I saw that I was going to keep that metal, I tried to be a little bit more careful. So in order to get the paint off of the metal, I just used a Q-tip and some nail polish remover, and it took it right off. I mean, you have to scrub a little bit, but it got it right off. And I think this is so cute. I love how that metal pops out off of that white. I'm just going to take one of Dollar Tree's foam squares, place that inside, and then I'm going to decorate this with this really tall, beautiful grass bundle from Hobby Lobby. It was on sale, and you guys, I don't remember exactly how much it was. I think it was $8, but that was before the sale. I'm also using some Dollar Tree baby's breath and some Spanish moss. So I'm just going to pull what little bit of moss I have out left, wrap that around the bottom part of the grass bundle, and then I'm just going to take these beautiful, well, they call them baby's breath, but they're cute little white flowers, and just sporadically place those around in my container. And I think this turned out so pretty. Let me know if you would have painted it all white. These three adorable signs at Dollar General for $1 a piece. They are so stinking cute. I removed the metal hangers from the back just by cutting them with my wire cutters, and then I took some pliers and pushed, if there was any little bit of wire sticking up, I pushed that down flat. This project is super easy, but it turns out so cute. I removed the hangers from all three pieces, and then I am taking my Waverly White chalk paint, and I'm really just taking my time to get those inside edges and not to get the paint on the chicken wire that's in the back. I painted the outside edges as well as the front, and I did put 2 coats on the front of all 3 of these frames. And then you'll let that paint dry. They are so adorable. To attach these together, I'm going to use some gingham ribbon from Hobby Lobby, and I'm using my speed square so that I can keep all 3 of these frames straight, as well as try to get the same distance between all 3 frames. Then I cut down 4 of the same length of ribbon so that I can attach these to the back of the sign using hot glue. And I'm just trying to keep them all lined up, like the top and the bottom ones lined up, so it looks like it's one continuous piece of ribbon on the back. Once I have those set in place, I'm going to use that same ribbon to create a hanger at the top, just by gluing one side and then looping it around and gluing the other side. And again, I try to keep those lined up with where the same ribbon was going down the pictures. And this is so cute. I absolutely love how this one turned out. Let me know, you guys, what you think of this one. 4 of these wood pallets from Dollar Tree. I removed the stickers, and I'm going to attach 2 of these together side by side using some hot glue. And I made 2 sets of 2. Once I had those glued together, I went in and made sure that I removed any glue strands, as well as any glue that may have seeped through those front parts of the slats, because I'm going to be using some antique Waverly wax, and that will not cover up the glue. I applied the wax just like I did with a previous DIY using a brush, and then going in with my lint-free cloth and wiping most of that wax off. I also made sure that I got the wood pieces that show through each of the slats, as well as the top and bottom edges of each of those slats. I also did the back part of both of these pieces. Once the wax has set up, this is how they look. It's so pretty. I'm going to create some hangers for these. Now, I wanted one to go up and down and one to go sideways. I'm using some jute rope to create the hangers, and I just tied a knot on each end, and then I'll glue the knot into the inside part of that slat, the back piece of the wooden pallet, and then I attached it to the back top piece of the other one that's going sideways. Once I have my hangers in place, I do go in with my hair dryer just to heat that up to remove any glue strands that may be lingering around. Now, I found these adorable metal stakes from Dollar General for $1 a piece. They are so cute. The rooster says a chick rules this roost, and the cow says work hard and stay humble. I think these are absolutely adorable. I removed the hanger from the top part just using a pair of pliers and bent that out, and then it will just slide right out. As far as the stake on the bottom, they're pretty easy to snap off. All I did was apply some pressure at the bottom and then kind of bend that stake back and forth, and you just wiggle it until it pops right off. And I did the exact same thing for the cow. To attach these to my sign, because they have indentions on the bottom and I kind of want them to stand out off of the sign, I'm using some of these brain teaser pieces from Dollar Tree. They also happen to match perfectly with the pallet wood stain that I used. And I just held the cow up there and lined my blocks up until it would sit evenly without wobbling around. Once I had the placement figured out for the blocks, I attached each one of those blocks to the pallet using E6000 and hot glue. Now I made sure I didn't mix my E6000 and hot glue together because it doesn't seem to work that well if you kind of mix them together. And I applied that to the pallet, and then I put the glue on top of each of those blocks so that I can set the metal cow down on the top and apply a little bit of pressure until that hot glue sets up. I did the exact same thing for the rooster. Now the E6000 is going to give it that permanent hold, and the hot glue is going to give it that temporary hold until that E6000 sets up. Again, I just lined it up to make sure it wasn't wobbly, and then glued each of those pieces down, and then glued the rooster down on top of that. And I think these are so cute. I love the color and the contrast between the wood and the black and the white. Let me know what you think. You guys, if you have a favorite, please let me know in the comments down below. For the base, I'm going to be using one of these round wood plaques. I believe I picked this up at Walmart for about $1. After I remove that tag, I'm also going to be using 4 of the medium-sized beads out of this large pack that I bought from Amazon, which I will have linked in my Amazon store if you are interested. I'm going to use the beads to create feet for our base, and I am just going to attach them using some hot glue. Once I have all of those beads in place, I'm then going to take my hairdryer to go over it to make sure that I get any of those glue strands off before I go in with my Waverly White chalk paint. So this only took one nice thick coat, and it provided really good coverage on this light wood. I did make sure that I painted the entire piece, including the bottom. So I'm going to set that to the side and let it dry for a moment. And while that is drying, I'm going to take one of these 3D wreath forms from Dollar Tree, and they come with these little aluminum type silver pieces that you attach at the top and the bottom. So if you've never assembled these before, all you do is pull your rings around to your desired location, and then you'll take those aluminum pieces and place it on the top, and they have these little tabs where you will fold over the shorter side of the tab and then wrap the larger side around. And you'll do that for all of those wreath form pieces. Once I have all of mine in place, I do go back in with a pair of pliers and just squeeze those tabs in place to make sure that they stay. You'll also go on the opposite end and do the exact same thing, just making sure that everything lines up. Once you have all those tabs in place on the top and the bottom, and I have made sure that all of them are nice and tight and secured, I am also going to go in with a little bit of hot glue to add those underneath, just to make sure that they all stay in place and that it is very sturdy. After that glue has set up, I am then going to go in with some of Dollar Tree's nautical rope. Now I did lay this on some wax paper just so that I wouldn't get glue everywhere. But this nautical rope will come apart in 3 strands. Well, it'll come up completely apart, but you can keep it in like 3 different strands. So I'm going to take one of those strands. I'm just going to separate it all, take the one strand out of the 3, and then I'm going to wrap this entire wreath form with this nautical rope. What I'm going to do is just start off with the hot glue and hold that end piece in place, and then I can wrap it around the 1-wire wreath form all the way down to the bottom. And once you get down to the bottom, you can just overlap it to go on the opposite side and create a nice sort of crisscross pattern at the top and the bottom. I also did make sure that I went down on my first strand. I made sure that I went down on the little metal piece that comes from the top and the bottom on the inside, and I wrapped those as well. This is how it looks after everything has been wrapped, and you can still kind of move your wreath form around just a little bit to shape it. For the base, I'm just going to hold the form on there, and I'm going to make 4 markings so that I can come in with my drill and drill holes so that I'll be able to attach this wreath form to the base. So I'm just going to set it up on some blocks of wood to make sure that I don't go through my table. And I'm just going to drill those holes, and then I'm going to come in with some 18 gauge wire. Now this wire, it's a pretty thick wire, but it's also very bendable, and you can pick this up at Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to pull a nice strand out, feed that under the bottom, and then I can hold my wreath form on there and pull it through the wreath form, and then go to the opposite corner and pull it back through the base. So once I have the wreath form set up, I can go to the opposite corner and feed that through. And then once I get that pulled through the bottom, just make sure that you pull it really tightly once you get those through so that it'll sit nice and secure. Then I can twist those together, and then I can feed one back through another one of the holes, and then go back through the wreath form and then come back down under that opposite hole. And then once I have that one fed through, I can twist it really, really tight on the bottom and make sure that it is nice and tight and secure, and that it is going to stay on this base. So once you have all of that tightened up and twisted around, I do put some hot glue on there just to give it some added security. And I put a really good generous amount of glue and let that glue dry. And then I'm also going to go on the top part where the wreath form meets the base, and I did put a little bit of glue under there. So to decorate this, I am using some eucalyptus from Walmart and some baby's breath from Walmart. I will also be using these beautiful purple and white dahlias and some really beautiful purple, they almost look like daisies, from Dollar Tree, and some floral wire to attach them. So I just cut my eucalyptus off of the bundle, and it's going to give me 4 nice strands. I'm going to take my floral wire and attach the bottom part of the eucalyptus to the bottom part of the wreath form. And once I get that twisted around there nice and tight, I'm going to cut that excess off, and then I'll take my pliers and push that down into the nautical rope so it doesn't poke your fingers or anything. And then I just did the same thing at the very top to attach that eucalyptus. I just skipped every other one, so you're going to have the greenery on every other wreath form. And then I'm going to go in with these beautiful dahlias, the purple and white, and if I'm saying that wrong, please let me know. I am going to hot glue these to the base, so right at the bottom of the wreath form onto the base, and I'm going to go around and do that on every other piece until I get it nice and full in the way I like for it to look. Then I put the last one on the very top that has that metal piece poking up through the bottom. And I'll just set that and attach that in there. And then once that glue sets up, I'm going to come in with some of the extra eucalyptus leaves that came off that last little branch. And I am just taking 2 leaves apiece and gluing that down right underneath that wire wreath form. Then I'm going to take the baby's breath and cut each of those branches off, and then attach them together to make a nice long strand of baby's breath. And I use about 3 of those, and then I'm going to attach those to the wreath form on the opposite pieces from where the greenery is. Then I'm going to take those beautiful purple daisies and glue those down in between the greenery pieces at the bottom of the base, and then I'll go all the way around and attach that. And then to give it something a little extra at the top, I'm going to take this decorative ball that's made of like branches. I've had this for a long time. I believe it came from Target. And I'm going to take one of those third strands that come apart from the nautical rope, and I'm just going to pull one of those strands out. Feed that through the top part of my decorative ball, tie a knot, and then I can tie that to that metal piece that we've wrapped with the nautical rope at the top. I'm just going to hold that, and that little metal piece hangs down from the top part of the wreath. I'm just going to hold that up to see how far I want it to hang down, and then I'm going to glue that to the top part and wrap that around so that it'll have this really cute twine decorative ball hanging from the center of the wreath. You're just going to want to hold that in place until that glue sets up. And then I'm also going to be creating a bow using some buffalo check ribbon that I have. I believe this came from Hobby Lobby. Yes, sorry. I couldn't remember if I used the Dollar Tree or if I used the Hobby Lobby ribbon. So I am just going to hold it up to see about how large I want my loops to be. And I'm going to cut down 2 strands or 2 lengths of ribbon the same size, and then 2 that are slightly shorter than that. And I'm going to create my loops at the top part, and I don't remember exactly like how far or how long the loops are, but I'm going to take the long one and then I'll put a short one on top of it, and then I will flip it over so that the fabric color is the same on each side, and I'll put the short one and then the long one on the bottom. And then I decided that I wanted a few more loops, so I created a couple of more about the same size as the 2 shorter ones. So it'll be 4 shorter ones and 2 longer ones. And guys, I'm sorry, it's a little bit off frame, and I hope I'm making sense. But I'm just going to pinch it right there underneath the loops, take some of my floral wire and twist that around underneath the loops. I'll cut that excess off that's sticking out from the bottom of the loops, but I'm going to leave the 2 longer ones and then 2 of the shorter ones for tails, and I did dovetail the ends of those. I took the extra floral wire and attached that to the top part of the wreath form, and then you're just going to want to fluff that bow out until it's nice and fluffy and pretty, and then you can shape your tails just by curling them around. And this is how it turned out. I think this is so beautiful. I love how it turned out. Using one of Dollar Tree's signs, after I remove the hanger on the back, I'm going to take my hair dryer and try to heat up that glue and remove most of the paper. What paper I can't get off, I do sand down to a nice smooth finish, wipe the debris off from sanding it. And although I am going to spray paint this piece, I wasn't sure how well this sign would take the spray paint, so I will give it some base coat, like a primer coat of my Waverly White chalk paint, emphasizing mostly on the outside edges as well as the top part. I'm not going to worry about painting the top center because I'm going to cover that up. Using one of Dollar Tree's metal planters, and I love the shape of this. I thought this would be perfect for this project. And I'm also using one of the wood squares that Dollar Tree sells in a pack of 6. I placed the bottom of the planter on 2 corners, made my markings, and used a handsaw to cut those 2 edges off and sanded it down to a nice smooth finish. I am going to apply the planter to the top part of the sign. So the top of the planter will now become the bottom part of our scale. And I'm going to apply that to the back edge, leaving a little bit of distance at the front and the 2 outside edges. So a little bit of a lip on the front and the 2 outside edges, and you'll see in just a minute. I am attaching that with some E6000. And then I will apply that piece of wood onto the top part using E6000. Because you can press the bottom of this, well, it's now the top part, in and out, I wanted to make sure it had a nice sturdy place for me to apply the dowels for the top part to hold the top part of the scale. I set a can of spray paint on there and let that set up for a couple of hours. I wanted, well, about an hour to make sure that it was glued down. Using 2 of Dollar Tree's 1 1/4 inch, they're called spouncer brushes or spouncer sponges. I cut them down to 2 inches apiece and sanded it down nice and smooth. You want to make sure that you have those ends very smooth and even so that the top part of your scale will sit evenly when you put it together. I am just finding the center. I'm not making exact measurements about where I'm going to place those dowel pieces. I just wanted to make sure that I could line them up together in the center somewhat, just trying to make sure they're in the same place. I attach that using E6000, and again, I will set something heavy on this and let that set up for about an hour or two, and I'm just using one of Dollar Tree's long signs to set that on there for the E6000 to set up. For the top part of the scale, I'm using one of Dollar Tree's cake pans and a round wooden circle from Walmart. These came in a pack of 6, I believe, for a couple of dollars. It was pretty rough, so I did sand it down until it was nice and smooth. And I'm going to apply that to the center of the bottom of the cake pan to not only provide some weight distribution for the scale, but I wanted to make sure that those dowels would adhere, so I thought that they would adhere to the wood better rather than the metal cake pan. Using E6000, I applied the wooden part to the bottom of the cake pan and let that set up. Now that the glue is somewhat set, I can assemble the top of the scale onto the bottom using E6000 and just centering the cake pan as best I can on top of those dowels. And then I'll go put a few little like paint jars that I have just to give it a little bit of weight, and then I let it set overnight to make sure that the E6000 set up and that this wasn't going to come apart. The next day, I took it outside and I'm going to spray paint it with Krylon Fusion All-in-One Paint and Primer in matte white. I gave this 2 thin coats of the spray paint. I waited about 20 minutes between the first coat and the second coat, and then I let it dry for about 4 hours before I did anything else with it. I also made sure I painted underneath the cake pan because you can see that. Using one of the plastic round plates from Dollar Tree, you get 8 for $1, I gave that 2 coats of Waverly White chalk paint. The 2 coats are on the outside rim in the front and the back, but I did paint the entire front portion of the plate because although I'm going to place something on top of it, I wanted to make sure that the color was consistent. And you will see the back part of the outside rim of the plate, so I made sure I gave that 2 coats. Again, using a wet wipe and my black chalkboard craft paint, I went around the outside rim of this plate to give it that nice enamelware look. And again, this just helps me get a more precise placement of my paint. Using a, I'm doing the same thing to the cake pan. I'm going to go around the outside rim of the cake pan, and then I'm going to give that just a couple of spots of just a little bit more paint, like a larger spot to give it more of that worn enamelware look. Make sure that dries, and then I'm going to use a printable that I printed off, which I also have on my website. If you are interested, it will print in this size. And I'm going to cut that out a little bit larger than the actual picture because I want to make sure I keep all of the black outside portion of that printable intact before I glue this down using Mod Podge. I just put a nice even amount on there, sealed it down, and then I will go over the entire front part of this plate, including the printout with the matte Mod Podge. You'll want to let that dry before you attach it to your scale. And originally I was going to place it at the bottom ledge of the scale, and it would look super cute that way, but then I changed my mind and decided I wanted to raise it up a little higher and cover up those corners. Let me know if you like it better at the bottom or at the top covering the corners. I attached this using some hot glue, and then this scale is finished. I love how it turned out. I have always wanted one of those antique looking kitchen scales, but they are so pricey, and I made this one for $4. I love how it turned out. Let me know what you think. Start off with 3 of these wooden drawers, and I'm going to remove the drawer inserts, and I'm going to be using some of these 1-gallon paint stir sticks. Now you can pick these up. No, they're quart paint stir sticks. I'm sorry. You can pick these up at Lowe's, and you get 30 in a pack for $1, and they're nice and wide, and they have a really beautiful wood grain look to it. I'm just going to hold the front part of the drawer that has that heart on there, line it up with 3 of those sticks, mark them with my pencil, then I'm going to score them with my utility knife. Then I will go in and cut those with my scissors. So once you score it with your utility knife, it really keeps it from splintering when you cut it with the scissors. Then I'm just going to make sure that they will line up and that they're even on the front part of the drawer. Then I'll sand each one of those pieces down, and then again make sure that they line up and that the drawer will be able to open and close properly, and that I don't have a lot of edging hanging over. I'm going to use my antique wax again on each of these pieces, making sure that I get all of the outside edges as well as the front of the piece. And then I'll wipe most of that off with my cloth. I'm also going to make sure that I use this same technique on the front of the drawers, because if there's a little bit of a gap between those slats with the craft sticks, you wouldn't see that light colored wood, you would see the dark wood. Then I'll set those to the side after I do all 3 of those and let those dry. After it has dried, I'm going to take my Gorilla Wood glue and apply those 3 craft sticks to the front of the drawer. Make sure everything is lined up, and then I'll set those to the side and let that wood glue dry before handling the drawer anymore. Once I have all of those in place, I am then going to take the 3 outside boxes that the drawers came in, and I am going to glue these 3 together using wood glue and hot glue. So the wood glue is going to give it that permanent hold, and the hot glue is going to give it that temporary hold. Once I get these 3 pieces together, I'm also going to use 2 of these wooden crates from Dollar Tree, and these have the indentations on the front and the back. So I'm just going to line these up, and I'm going to glue them end to end, again using my Gorilla Wood glue and my hot glue. And now the front parts for the openings for those drawers, as well as the openings for the crates, are all going to be facing towards you. And then you can glue those 3 drawers right on the center top of the 2 crates. Now I made sure that it was flush in the front, and you will have a little bit of it overhanging on the back. I'm using one of Dollar Tree's beautiful wood signs. I love the design on this. And after I remove the hanger, I'm just going to line those 2 side pieces up to the back part of those 3 drawers. And I'll apply that again with my wood glue and hot glue. And just lining those up with the top edge of those 3 drawer pieces, and then hold that in place until your glue sets up. Now I like a finished look, so I'm going to be filling in all of these cracks with some spackling. You can use caulk, wood putty. You don't have to fill them in at all, but I just like to have a nice, smooth, finished look rather than having these seams or gaps there. So once I apply all of this to all of the areas that I want to seal, I'm also going to take some of these wooden beads. Now, I got these from Amazon. They came in a huge pack with like 980 pieces, and I want to say it was like $15 or $16, which I think is a really good deal. And I'll have that linked in my Amazon store if I can. I am also going to take my spackling and fill in one of the holes on each of these wood beads to make sure that they're nice and smooth. Once my spackling has dried, I'm going to go over it with one of Dollar Tree's sanding blocks and sand everything down nice and smooth, and I also made sure that I sanded those beads. Then I'm going to go in with a cloth and make sure that I wipe any of the dust from sanding off of all of the entire pieces. And I'm going to take my Waverly White chalk paint, and I'm going to give these 2 coats. And I did make sure that I painted this entire piece, the inside part of these drawers, as well as the back part and also the bottom. Now, once you put your drawers in, we can then take our beads and apply those to the front parts of the drawers to become the handles. And I'm going to attach these with some Gorilla Wood glue. Now, I am going to hold that in place for just a few seconds after I line it up and press it firmly. And then you don't want to handle it until that glue sets up. I didn't use hot glue because there wasn't quite enough room on the bead for the wood glue and the hot glue. So you just want to make sure that it dries completely before you handle it. Then I'm going to take some of that same scrapbook paper that I used in the previous DIY, and this came out of one of these beautiful books that I picked up on sale from Hobby Lobby. And then I measured the inside part of the 2 bottom parts of the crates. And then I'm just going to use my Cricut cutter to cut those out and make sure that my design is lining up. Again, I always like to make sure that it's going to fit in there before I attach it with any kind of glue. I'm going to use the same matte Mod Podge, apply that to the back of those 2 bottom crates, and then I can place my paper in there. I'll do the other side the exact same way, and once I have that second piece of paper in there, I can go in and add my Mod Podge to the front to seal those in. I think this paper is so beautiful, and I am loving this white and wood and this gorgeous pattern that I went ahead and decided to add this to the top part of this piece as well. So I just cut a piece that was slightly larger than the top part of this. We'll call it a shelf now. I'll apply my paper on there, and then I'm just going to cut it as close as I can to the edge, and then I'm going to go over that with the Mod Podge on the front again to seal that in, and then I'll just set it to the side and make sure that my Mod Podge has dried before I go in and sand any of that excess off. So I just took a sanding block and went in one direction and went around the entire top part of this piece until I had it sanded down nice and smooth. And then I can reinsert my drawers, and this shelf is finished. This is so cute. This would look so beautiful in a bathroom to hold, you know, cotton balls, your fingernail clippers, your tweezers. You could use it as a decor piece. It's really gorgeous. I love how this one turned out. I found these cute 3.5 by 5-inch wood picture frames from Dollar Tree, and I went ahead and picked up 4 of those. I'm going to remove the tag at the bottom with the tiny little screws, and I'm going to do that for all 4 pieces, and I'll set those aside and use those on another DIY. I went ahead and removed the sticker and then the backing and the glass and the picture from inside of the frame, but make sure that you keep the glass because we're going to be inserting that back into the frame after we do some painting. I went ahead and took some pliers and removed the tabs that were holding the back of the frame in, and it was very simple to do. And like I said, I went ahead and did this for all 4 frames. Now, I am not going to worry too much about filling these holes in just yet. I want to get a coat of paint on there so that I can reinsert my glasses. I'm going to be painting this with some Waverly white chalk paint, and I only go ahead and put one coat on there. Just really wanted to make sure that I got those grooves so that when I put the glass back in there, it will already be painted and I won't have to paint around that. I went ahead and did that for all 4 frames, and then you're going to want to make sure that that paint is dry before you reinsert those glass pieces. To secure the glass down, I am using some E6000 and also some hot glue. And I like to put my E6000 on a Q-tip. It just helps me to place it better and not have any seepage or too much glue in one area. I'm going to put that in the corners, and then once I get that E6000 in place, I'll come in with my hot glue and go in between where I put all of the E6000. Trying not to mix it together because for some reason if you mix it, it just doesn't stick as well. Once I have that in place, I'll go ahead and put my glass back in. And you want to press firmly but not too firm because you don't want to break that glass. The glass is pretty thin. And then I'll do that for all 4 pieces to reinsert that glass. Now I'm going to assemble these 4 pieces using the E6000 and some hot glue. And if you haven't guessed yet or not, we are making a lantern, and I love how this lantern turned out. It is so beautiful. Again, I'm just going to put some E6000 in like 3 places there, and then the hot glue in between. And then I'll place this frame up against one of the other frames, making sure that you keep where you inserted your glass to the inside of the lantern that you're making. You want to make sure that all 4 pieces on the outside look cohesive and that the insert for the glass is on the inside. And I'll do that for the other frame, attaching it to the first frame that we attached there. So 2 sides will have just one single picture frame, and then 2 sides will have the edges of the other 2. But once we complete this, you won't even be able to tell it. It'll just look really good. Now, they're not super sturdy at first, but once you put all 4 pieces together and then the bottom and the top, it is very sturdy. So I go ahead and I apply that top piece, and because I was taking my time and just trying to make sure everything was lined up, I only did one side at a time. That way when I put my hot glue on there, it wouldn't have set up before I could get that other side lined up and pushed down. So once I get all of that together, I'm going to set that to the side, and now I'm going to start working on the bottom and top of the lantern, and I'm using 2 of these signs from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and remove those metal hangers from the back and go ahead and remove the stickers as well. What I like to do for my stickers is I like to take my hair dryer and just heat it up a little bit to loosen that glue up, and then usually the stickers will peel right off. One of the signs, the sticker did not want to peel off too well, so if you have that happen, you could just take some sandpaper and sand it down nice and smooth. Then I'll go ahead and remove those inserts that are on the inside, and one of them has this nice MDF heart, which is great because Valentine's Day is coming up, so I think I could DIY with that. And I didn't realize that it was in there with a staple, so I just really had to pull hard, and then I realized, oh, there's 2 little holes there, so there was a staple in there. And it's really easy to remove those staples. You can just use your pliers and pull those out. I'm going to go ahead and set this one to the side and start working on the top piece. So I will be using one of the wood boxes from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and remove the lid. I just need the box itself, and I am going to attach this to the center of one of the signs, and I'm going to be using some wood glue as well as some hot glue, again making sure I don't mix those 2 glues together. And I just go ahead and put that on the middle of each section and then put my hot glue on there. And then I'm just going to set that down right in the center of the sign, or try to get it as centered as possible, and then let that hot glue set up. I'm going to be using some of these quart paint sticks. These come from Lowe's for 30 in a pack for $1, and they were the perfect width for this. I'm just going to mark the edge of the sign on the craft stick, and then I'll use my scissors to cut those down. And you always want to make sure that you set it on there and make sure that it lines up and that it is the size you want before you glue anything down. I also took some sandpaper and sanded those ends off to make them nice and smooth. So once you know that it's going to fit and it's the right size, I just used some hot glue right there on the edge of the sign and push the craft stick down, and then I'm going to do that on the opposite side as well. For the two remaining sides, I'm just going to take the craft stick and hold it up and mark it on the edge of the craft sticks that are already on there, or you can also go by the corner of the wooden box. And I will go ahead and attach those with hot glue, and I'm going to do that for the opposite side as well. Once again, making sure that it fits before you glue that down. So if you have any cracks between the wooden box and the craft stick, that's okay, because we're going to fill those in and you won't even be able to see it. And then once you get the other side down and glued in place, I am going to be taking some premium spackling, and I love this stuff. It dries in like 10 or 15 minutes. I will try to leave a link to that in my description box if you are interested. I'm going to use that to fill in all of these creases and cracks to give it a nice smooth finish. And like I said before, if you have some space there in between your craft stick and your wooden box, you can fill that in with this as well. You could also use some wood putty if you like. I go ahead and do the bottom of the other one because this is the top, so you will be able to see those edges once this lantern is assembled. And I am using that one with a sticker on the top, so you wouldn't be able to see that sticker once we put it down on top of the lantern. You'll let that dry, set it to the side and let it dry, and I also filled in the cracks on the sides of the lantern so that it would have a nice smooth finish, and I will be going over that and touching up that paint once it dries and I sand it down. So I just gently took like 150 grit sandpaper and went over that and made sure that everything was nice and smooth before I did any painting. And I do go in and cover those two holes that were on the bottom of that sign. I didn't notice at first, but I did go in and fill those in as well. I took my Waverly white chalk paint and I gave each piece 2 coats, allowing them to dry in between coats. And I did paint the top and bottom of both of these signs, so they're fully covered. Now this piece is going to be the bottom piece, and I'm going to set that to the side, and I'm going to finish working on the top piece. But I'm just showing you here how I have covered up all of those spackling where we sanded it down. So this is how it's going to look once I attach it, but before, well, I'm going to go ahead and attach it with some E6000 and some hot glue. And I'm just going to put that, in the corners there. And then I'm going to go back after I get this set up and we'll be making a handle. So I'm just going to put that in all the little places just so that this E6000 is going to give you that permanent hold, and the hot glue is just going to hold it in place until that E6000 sets up. And once I get all of that on there, I'm just going to try to center this up on top of the top piece. So now you're looking at the bottom. So we're actually placing the top of the lantern on there. So this is upside down right now. But it was just easier for me to see how to line it up. You will have some overhang on 2 sides, a little bit more than the other 2 sides. So now that that's together, I can go ahead and I can create the handle for the lantern. I am using one of these wooden beads and a book ring. Both of these are from Dollar Tree. So the wooden bead came off of one of those signs from the Dollar Tree that had the cute hanger on there. I'm just going to slide the bead on there, and then I will use some hot glue on each side to hold it in place. And you want to make sure that your glue has set and dried before you paint this, because you don't want to, you know, ruin your glue that you have set there. And I'm going to paint this with some black chalkboard craft paint. I get this paint from Dollar General, and it provides a really good coverage. I only have to paint this one time, and I painted the entire piece. And then I took that same black craft board paint and a nice clean wet wipey, and then I'm just going to dab it into the paint and then take my finger and go over all of the edges, and it's going to give me some nice pretty lines to distress this lantern. And I do go over every single edge, including the bottom piece, the bottom section of the lantern that we have set to the side. Once I have that all finished up, you do want to make sure you let that dry before you put your top handle on there. So the paint has dried on the handle, and this is how I've already gone ahead and done all of those edgings on the bottom. And we're not going to attach the bottom to the lantern. I'm just going to be attaching the handle, and I'm going to use that with some hot glue. And you just want to put a nice generous amount right there in the center, and then just hold the bead in the glue until that glue sets up. So the reason we're not going to be attaching the bottom of the lantern is you want to be able, I'm going to use an LED light, a battery operated candle, and I recommend you use battery operated, not a real one, because there's no airflow in there. And that way you can change the batteries, you can change out your candle, you could put greenery in there, whatever you like. I just absolutely love how this one came out, and I hope you do too.